Good morning. My name is Brian Collier. I serve as Executive Vice President at Foundation for the Carolinas here in Charlotte. And although most people know the Foundation for its work in Charlotte, we actually serve a much broader region, 13 counties, including upstate South Carolina. And we go as far as Rockingham, which is Richmond County, Iredell, places like that. So although people think of my work specifically around the issue of economic opportunity in Charlotte, I would tell you that nothing in the report that we completed a couple of years ago is exclusive to Charlotte. All of the issues that we raise are those that impact urban areas and rural areas, suburban areas, and I think one of the things that I would say differentiates the work that we did in Charlotte from a place like Rockingham, North Carolina, is the story that you have to learn about how your community came to be the way it is, especially around issues of race and segregation and exclusion and things like that along the way that have sort of made the community into the way that you see it today. So one of the things when we looked at the issues in Charlotte was we could not take our eyes away from how our community was impacted by things like systemic racism, things like the ways that places where roads and highways were built that decimated communities. And with Charlotte, with so many transient people, people moving into the community, not understanding the history, they come here and they suddenly say, I've moved here from Cleveland or New York or a place like that. I've come here, everything is beautiful in South Charlotte. How could anyone not be successful in this community? Having never driven to places like West Charlotte and other parts of our community which have not shared in the prosperity to the same level. So I kind of jumped in the middle of the story. But what I want to do is go back and ground you just a little bit on the Raj Chetty Study, how it impacted our community, some of the things that we identified as key issues for our community, and then to tell you what I think are the couple of promising areas that we're looking to explore. So first of all, I think it's very important to understand that although now we have a task force report, we had a task force that spent almost 2 years on the work, that's not the way it started. It really started in 2013 and 2014 when a few of us were thinking about how philanthropy has not actually benefited our community in the ways that we like to tell each other. Me, a Foundation for the Carolinas, I like to tell everyone how large our foundation is. We're the 6th largest in the country, how many grants we give out a year. But have we actually changed our communities? Has philanthropy actually benefited those communities the way in which we would think of? And I think in the summer of 2013, when someone handed me a newspaper article with the first round of Raj Chetty's work, it called into question everything that we were doing. Because what he said was, when I look at the 50 largest metropolitan areas across the country and I try to figure out, let me take a step back. Because one of the things that he was trying to say is, nationally, is the mythology of the American dream true, and is it still alive in our country? And if it is it localized to where a child is born? Does that have any bearing on the outcome of that child? And what he found is, first and foremost, when you want to live the American dream, the U.S. is probably not the best place for you to pursue that. Places like Finland and Canada and other places have much higher mobility rates than the U.S. So one, we have a problem in the U.S. around the American dream. And then secondly, he found that it is highly localized to where a child is born, and especially where they spend the first 10 to 13 years of their life. So if you look at a map, although Charlotte ranked 50th of 50, that's just because he measured 50 cities. If he had measured rural areas around Charlotte, other communities, the entire Southeast is implicated by his work. When you look at the study that he did, you will see dark shades of red as being areas of low mobility. The entire Southeast is low mobility. And so one of the things that we have to sort of think about here in this room and in other rooms is, why is that so? Why is that story the one that uniformly presents itself across the Southeast? And again, I think one of the things that you can't unwind from this research is the history of race and racism and how that impacts that. So first and foremost, we know that mobility rates are low. We also know that if you were born in the 1940s across the U.S., 1940s or 1950s, you had better than a 90% chance that you would out-earn your parents. By the 1980s, It's a toss-up, coin toss, 50-50 chance. No matter where you're born, no matter what your income background, you have about a 50-50 chance that you'll out-earn your parents. So that information fed into what we decided to do here in this community. So we used that research. We started looking at what are the drivers that cause mobility. We also identified that what we were basically talking about was the child and the caregiver responsible for them. So we did almost 2 years of work. We went out into the community. We talked to various people. We had tests. We had meetings all over the community. We talked to immigrant populations. We talked to African-American communities. We talked to affluent. We talked, whoever would listen to us, we talked to them. And we tried to figure out what are the things that we believe are most impactful. And we came up with 3 determinants and what we call 2 cross-cutting factors. The determinants are those things that are what we believe out of all of the things that are possible, the hundreds of variables that are possible, what are the things that we believe are most impactful? One is early childhood development and education. That can be things like brain development opportunities, pre-K, childcare, parent engagement, things like that. The other one is family and child stability, and what we put under that are things like affordable housing, which we've made great progress on over the last couple of months, criminal justice system, a living wage. One of the ones that I would lift up much higher than we did in the report, which is the issue of mental health, especially adolescent mental health. I've come to believe that's actually one of our country's greatest challenges today. The other one that we lifted up, which is controversial, is the issue of family structure and planned pregnancies. And that was one where we had a huge debate over, but at the end of the day, our task force said, the research is clear that a child who is born intended to 2 caregivers has a much better chance at a successful outcome. But by the way, that's just research, and we leave people to make the choices they want to, but we want people to understand what the research tells us. Last one is around college and career readiness. Again, internships, but paid internships, not just internships, paid internships, apprenticeship programs, college access, and also understanding alternative pathways to a livable wage. And then the cross-cutting factors that we identified are segregation. All of your investments in these other areas are going to be undermined to the extent to which your community is cut off from one another, where groups are segregated. If you look at Charlotte's segregation patterns, you would be blown away by how defined roadways cut off essentially affluent from poverty, and the two do not mix at all, including in our schools where they're highly segregated. So we have to address that. The last one I want to talk about in a little more depth is this issue of social capital. To ignore the issue of social capital, meaning your networks, the economic value of the relationships that you have in your life, the exposure that allows you to have, the understanding of various groups, we tend to ignore that because we can't, it's hard to measure. So that's the pushback that we always get is, well, social capital seems so squishy, and how do you measure it? But I can guarantee you that anyone who has emerged from poverty has someone to point to in their life who gave them not only a good talk about how you could be whatever you want to be and stay strong and all of that, but also a concrete path to something. They made a call on their behalf. They pushed their resume forward. They encouraged them to go to college. And by the way, here's how you're going to get to college. Because what we have to do is we have to lower these barriers that kids in low-income areas, low-opportunity areas see, which is they're being told by the environment, our community as a whole, that college or the things that they're pursuing are not for people like them. So we have to break down these barriers. Or they're being told that even if you could do that, it's not possible for you because it's too expensive. You don't know anyone, something like that. But that's how we all move through our worlds, is this idea of social capital. So one of the things that I'm looking at is, rather than using Raj Chetty Study of measuring the value of a life in terms of how much money you make, what if we shifted our lens? What if we said, it's not about how much money you made, but what if a community could create an environment where a young adult was prepared to make a decision and felt the sense of agency about what they want to do with their life, and then had the capacity to pursue that because of all the things that you had done along the way for them to help build a network, help build exposure, help build an understanding for them that the world is possible, that their visions are, their dreams are possible, and not in some vague way about reach for the stars, but literally, here's the concrete pathway for you to achieve that. Because that is the way that we treat our high affluence and high opportunity kids. They grow up believing from almost day one that they can do whatever they want to do, and then they have people in front of them who are helping build that pathway. So that's the kind of work that we're going to do, and I know we'll talk maybe a little bit more here in a few minutes about some work that we're doing with Raj Chetty's group specifically now, and this intentionality that we're applying to social capital.